Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Monday, June 6, 2022 Transportation Commission meeting. Glad to have you with us. We will start with a roll call. Mr. Ballard. Present. Mr. Shoemaker. Mr. Lancaster. I am here. Tracy Hopkins.
Here.
Mr. Lewis.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Mr. LeClaire.
Here.
Mr. Leckie.
Here.
John Wasson with the ACHD.
Here.
Lisa Etkonen.
Here.
Pardon me if I didn't get that correct. Elisa Taysom
Here.
and Justin Price.
Here.
Welcome all. Okay, first item is the adoption of the agenda. I don't have any changes. Do you, staff?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Skip R.D. Huntley.
On purpose. I was told he would not be here today. Any changes to the agenda, gentlemen? Okay, hearing none. The next item is the approval of the minutes of the May 2nd meeting. Anyone with comments, changes, wants to make?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I have a couple of things, if I might, before we vote. At the bottom of page 4, item 6, staff communications, the last full line in that says best to convene the school zone subcommittee to discuss the best solutions for crossing to Hillsdale Elementary. I'm pretty sure that we asked for them to discuss the history of and possible best solutions, because that's been an ongoing topic over the years. Okay, thank you. A question, if I may, out of the minutes. Was the action that we didn't take on the North Records Way paragraph at the top of page 5, was that reported out to council since they had sent it to us in the first place?
Mr. Chair, yes, it was reported to them, and that they get a transportation project update memo that's similar to the one the Transportation Commission gets, almost identical. And the update was in their project update memo.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. And then the second paragraph on page 5, second line, put up a compression brake. It should be BRAKES, brakes prohibited sign, typo there. And then also in that paragraph, we ask, and I believe that she's going to be here today, that staff check with the complainant to see if they could identify which particular trucks might be making the problem, and if there was a particular time of day it might be occurring. I think that should be part of that paragraph, if that's okay with the commissioners. That's all I have. Yes, sir.
Back on break, you adding an S or were you correcting the spelling?
Both.
Okay. I was paying attention to half your comment.
Thank you for paying attention.
Just half of it.
Anyone else? Okay, we have a motion and a second. I would
Those changes?
propose to amend that to include the changes that have been mentioned. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, we're honored. The mayor has agreed to come give us a little bit of information today on the state of his perception of transportation in the city. This is at the request of or suggestion of Commissioner Leclerc, who thought it would be a good idea. We talked to the mayor, and he did too, so welcome.
I turned it on, you turned it off, there we go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, for inviting me to come speak to you today, have a dialogue, answer some questions if you are so inclined. But first, I just want to say thanks for your dedicated service. Many of you have been doing this for many years, and you continue to show up month after month. I want to say it's greatly appreciated. From my standpoint, that of the city council, the city, the staff, it's awesome that you guys are interested in talking about transportation when we're a city that doesn't control our own roads to begin with from that standpoint. But just to get, I don't know if who was able to attend. I know some of you are the state of the city, or maybe you heard some of my comments. I spent a lot of time talking about transportation, at least from what I see is occurring in the city. And I think that that's where I'll start with my comments is, well, what is occurring and what needs to continue to occur? And then where's the best that I'm trying to put my time and interest in either improving transportation network or focusing on safety issues, or where I feel like I'm hearing from the community on issues. First and foremost is, we're seeing a lot of our state highway facilities under construction, being improved, or planned to be built. That's a great thing for Meridian when we are surrounded, bisected by these road networks. So seeing them continue to develop is great. And what is Highway 16 going to do for us? We don't know. But I do think it's going to definitely have an impact on our local road network in several areas, as well as some of our other state facilities, such as Eagle Road, related to that. But same focus, seeing what is currently occurring on those roadways, one of the things that I'm trying to do is understand that you can't just ask for one thing and wait till that gets done before you go ask for other things or try to see improvements. So Linda Road overpass still is kind of that, while all those other things are moving forward, we haven't had to put in a lot of our political time into Highway 16. Other people were doing that for us. Chinden, kind of the same way. After we got the STAR agreements moving forward, really didn't have to put time in that. Eagle Road had the STAR improvement, but Linda Road, while that's not a state highway, it does go over the interstate, and ITD is involved. So that's probably the number one area where I've been investing my time and energy is on making sure we get the Linda Road overpass constructed. I think ITD is there. In fact, I'm going to go speak to the board about this when they're in town next week. I'll be going and making some comments about that, just to keep it on their radar to know. But with the moving forward with the design that's currently underway, that really just now tees up the funding for construction once that design is complete and underway. And I think that there's willingness there at the state level related to that. More work needs to occur on the ACHD side of that project. But that's really where probably more of my political time is spent, is trying to get them to make that a priority investment for our community to make that connection. And that's really about connecting the north and south side of our community together. The other two, for me, the other two connection points are out towards Owyhee High School on USIC and down to Discovery Park in the south. Really trying to expand our local road network into those areas where we're going to have major gathering spots or a lot of people driving to them. Looking at USIC as that primary corridor out to Owyhee High School and working with ACHD for them to prioritize that. And then in the south, just finding a way, because you're going to have a lot of people going there at night, trying to get that safety aspect of getting people to Discovery Park in the south. And that's been more working with Brighton, who's been focused on that. ACHD already has projects planned along Eagle Road to get all the way down to Lake Hazel. Then Brighton is really doing the work of, quite frankly, they think they're going to get it from Lake Hazel all the way over to, or from Eagle all the way over to Meridian Road eventually with that road improvement. So that's going to be whether you come down Meridian Road and you go east, or you come down Eagle Road and you go west. making a nice little interconnectivity down into that area. And so again, that's been working more on the private side to make that happen. And that's what we are trying to do. We're trying to work with all of our partners, whether in the development community, the business community, ITD or ACHT, to focus on those type of capital projects which are needed so that we can work on the capacity issues here in Meridian. Secondarily, I would say it focuses a little bit more on what I would consider the safety aspects. And this is where, I think we all can agree to disagree, or we all see things a little differently when it comes to safety. There's engineered safety, there's practical safety, and there's community expectations for safety. I think those are all different in a lot of ways, but that they do create the conversation. That's really what we talked about with Eagle Road. When we look at that, when we look at that corridor in terms of, well, what makes it safe? Well, some people said, just eliminate all the turning movements. Safer. If you make it expressway, no one can turn left or right. You can never have any crashes, right? Except for maybe some rear ends. But you also don't have commerce in that case on that corridor. So it's a balancing act. But really, to me, speed limits set an expectation of the driver. Whether they can go that fast or they should go that fast is irrelevant. For some, it says, that's how fast I should be able to go along this roadway. And that's what engineers say. That's how fast you should be able to go along this roadway. But, it's the expectation level that we are really trying to get to is what do we expect people to drive through our community in any way, on any road related to that. I know there's been conversations about what's the appropriate speed in subdivisions, what's the appropriate speeds, but I think that there's a number out there. I don't know what it should be, but I think 55 is too much along Eagle Road. 45, 40, I don't know. But I think there's a combination of what, we have some roads in Meridian which are 45. We have some which are 40. So I think either is plausible without forcing too many other types of impacts related to limiting access, doing U-turns. But that's a bigger conversation, and that's one that I assume you all be involved in that. I talked about that to get the business community involved, to work with ITD and ACHD on what that looks and feels like. But that's kind of that safety aspect. Where are these areas where safety matters? I think another one that we'll have a conversation about is still around Records Road. And I'm not so concerned personally about Records Road from River Valley going north, but Records Road going south through the park, through the village, back up to Fairview. We're going to have more apartments built in that area. The village is going to be expanding more. That area is going to become more congested, just generally. And you throw in there the park activities that are occurring. So what's an appropriate expectation of speed through that area that really is not based upon what the engineer standard can or should be. And, and the part that kind of brings us all back into home is we have things happen like we're on USTIC where ACHD said, well, let's put stuff in the middle so we slow people down. We know that if we want to engineer it to a safer, slower speed, we can do other things to slow people down if that's what we have to do in order to make, just like here in downtown, you put something in the middle of the street, people are going to go slower, right? That's how it works. But where are those areas in our community where the safety is as much of a priority as compared to the movement of vehicles through those areas? And so that's another area where we are definitely focusing our time and energy and having conversations about transportation issues here in the city. You guys will obviously be part of the conversation and make recommendations. And your recommendations go to council where I don't have a vote. Everyone understands that. I don't have a vote in any of this. I just have a voice. And so your recommendations, whether council agrees or disagrees, that's one aspect. I also have my own opinion, and I don't have a vote on anything. But I have the letter of the pen and the bully pulpit, and I'll use that. And that may or may not always be in accordance with what your thoughts are on issues. But I do want to say it's all about presenting the information for people. City council doesn't always agree with planning and zoning on their recommendations for projects. and they make modifications, they do things different. Doesn't mean anybody is not valued or appreciated for their time and interest and their comments. But ultimately, I think whether it's elected officials or appointed officials or citizens, we all have our own viewpoints on what we think is appropriate for our community. And that's what I'll continue to advocate for, those things that I think are appropriate for our community, whether they're, engineered standards, non-engineered standards, speed limits, road priorities, whatever those investments are from the city, from our transportation partners. So I'd like to think we have a good relationship with our partners, both at District 3 and ACHD, and we're going to continue to work with them on the things that we've talked about. And, I think I'd probably just kind of stop there from a practical standpoint about where I see us with transportation in the city of Meridian. Still my number one priority for our community, for those things that we don't provide. And we'll see what our citizen survey says that's out right now, and we expect to probably start hearing back in a month to see if it's still an issue for our residents. I won't be surprised if it drops down as not the number one priority, because for the last 2 years, it hasn't been as visible of a challenge with people working from home. The roads are not as busy. The schools were not in as much. People have been changing and altering their traffic. Now with prices going up, people are maybe looking at alternate ways to move about. So it's an interesting time to be talking about transportation in Meridian, because I think we're seeing a lot of good improvements, but we're also seeing people adjusting to different issues in our community that maybe makes transportation not the number one priority for the first time this time around. But I'll bet a burger with anybody come September, it's the number one thing I hear complaints about. Because I think when we get back to school practices this year, fully fledged and in employment, I think we're going to see some more challenges on our roadways. Because I don't think if you look at how much we've grown, yet the school enrollment has not. Unless people continue to keep their kids out of schools, if people start putting their kids into schools the way we expect, we're going to have more people on the roads traveling to our high schools. Which is where we often see a lot of our challenges is around the schools and those pathways. So with that, just like to say thank you for the opportunity, and be happy to have a conversation about any of these or other topics.
Any questions for the mayor? Mr. Lancaster.
Mr. Chairman, so this is kind of a unique day for me. I had a chance encounter and conversation with our congressman, Congressman Fulcher, and now we're listening to and having a chance to speak with the mayor. I need to find a school board member or something today to, see if I can complete my bingo card. But Mr. Chairman and Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask a question that you didn't talk about, and that's about transit. What's your vision for transit in Meridian? And let's start there.
Thank you, Mr. Lancaster. Mr. Chairman, my vision is we have a route that's going to start, and it's going to take a couple years before we see the value of that route. And so I would not expect to see any increased funding for transit in terms of fixed transit in this. It's not in this year's budget anymore, just the increased cost or the next year. But I think we're gonna have to see if there's value in it for the residents of Meridian. If they're not interested in the route that we have, is it a different route? But we're putting it right where all the apartments are. And if it's not successful, then the question will be, okay, why? From that standpoint. But I think I'm personally we've made investments in the Harvest Transit for the veterans to get them a little further. And if Harvest Transit continues to do well, I can see additional investment in that area specifically. But the rest of it will be a little bit more wait and see. And honestly, long term, I don't see fixed line routes being the long-term solution for transit in Meridian of 35 or 45-foot buses. I would personally see a more 12 to 15 passenger van, autonomous being our long-term future. But we're not there, obviously. I mean, that's society being acceptable and technology being there, but I think it can be there quicker than we realize. But that would probably be the, when it comes down to it, something going down Locust Grove that's coming in and out of the subdivisions to deliver people is probably what I see as the more viable option long-term. But fixed line, larger ones will be part of the conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Mayor.
Anyone else with questions for the mayor?
Mayor?
Leclerc?
So it's really helpful to me to have this discussion because as a commission, I think we all want to have as much as we can, a unified voice as we deal with ACHD and Department of Transportation and understanding where your priorities are and help us implement that for you and work together. And so those are tremendous things. I took notes on what you said, and it's going to keep it all in mind as we go forward. Sometimes a commission like this can get caught up in a neighborhood issue, and the other agencies might begin to wonder, well, is this more important than the overpass at Linder, or why is this such a big deal to them? And so we have to temporize a little, I think, as a commission, and try to keep things in perspective. And this is a great overview today to help us do that. You talked about records, and I think I think it's interesting that has risen to the peak that it has. It seems like we have other areas that could be in that role, and so I think I'll just leave that comment, and you don't have to worry about it. But the big thing we keep seeing, I think, here is, and as you said, will continue to be an issue, is schools and traffic and congestion and angry neighbors and, and everything that goes around almost every school in town, not just the high schools, but the elementary schools as well. And so we have a committee that's devoted to those issues, subcommittee, and we try to work with the school district as much as we can to understand those concerns and try to see where the hottest fire is and try to address an item at a time. And it just seems very frustrating. And I don't know if, I'm sure you've felt that same frustration, and I don't know if you have any advice for us, or if there are school areas that have risen to your level that we should be more aware of than the ones we already are looking at. So that's my question, is how are we doing with school district interaction, and how we're communicating to them, and how we're attempting to solve these issues around schools?
Thank you, Commissioner O'Carroll, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to answer this in two different ways. When I talk about USIC, I use Mountain View as an example. Mountain View, anybody know what year Mountain View was built? 2000? Just use 2000 as a rough year. They still don't have sidewalks on the arterial that's next to Mountain View. Now that's finally going to get resolved here soon, right, John, with that project here in the next year when it starts moving forward. But making sure we have adequate public infrastructure or network in and around the schools, that's one of the things. That's really what I'm talking about, OIHE. Getting a good road with sidewalks and basic accessibility out to that area, because unlike what the things that we talk about is, not every student who's out there is going to be driving a car when they leave their practice at the end of the day. Some of them are going to have to walk, some of them are going to have to bike, and there's really no safety measures that are along those major roads near our schools. So that to me is the capital side of the investment to make sure that that's occurring. The issues that we're seeing though from the drop-off pickup or the parking in or around, to be honest with you, I maybe will hear a little bit about those, but I think that you guys do a good job of addressing and working with the police department and with the school district and go from that area. I don't know how much involvement there is from the PTA, or is that just primarily done through West Ada, but if there's ever anything that our office can do by having our community liaison work with the PTA as well, we're happy to help be part of those dialogues. But I think that it's the best I can say is, yeah, take what you've learned from others and try to apply it, see who can make it work better. Unfortunately, the area out there on Black Cat, with the non-West Ada school, the charter school that has created its own challenges out there, and every school has its, I hear you guys just talking about Hillsdale and getting this people safely to and from there as it relates to the parking and the kids walking. Your investment with the subcommittee and your knowledge is really going to be the best way to find those solutions which don't have a monetary cost, and maybe those that are long-term that do, and would be great community programs through ACHD to make that happen. So.
Anyone else?
Mr.
Chairman,
Mr. Ballard, heard you first.
Mayor, I'd like to thank you for the presentation, for topic comments. And as I look around, I see Ms. Itoken, Rate Advisory Committee, John Watson. But transportation without the movement, rate, and people do complain. That's always going to be there. I think one of the challenges that you face, and we all face, is that we've made some assumptions about our processes. Roads will always be there, whatnot. Last couple of years, we've had to ask some questions we never thought we would ask, or seen some situations thought about. Comment about Eagle being a state highway going through town, if you will. That's historically how the main street of town's been. So we're seeing some challenges that we didn't think about, been confronted with the new frontier. But again, I want to thank you for your presentation again today. Well done, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hopkins.
Mr. Mayor, I got one comment and then I got a question for you about schools. It seems like they engineer and spend a ton of time developing beautiful, great state-of-the-art schools and lack any design or thought pattern when it comes to the ingress and egress and parking in those same facilities, because I've been to a bunch of them, and it always confounds me how they can design roads as well as they do and then leave people stranded in the parking lot for an hour. So I think if they spent a little more time on thinking about the situation of the school and how to get people in and out, probably work wonders for correcting our problem. But the question I have is, where on is the rail and trail in your vision?
Well, Commissioner Hopkins, Mr. Chairman, sorry, I'm not used to being on this side of it with the pleasantries. First to go to schools, I think the interesting thing with the Owyhee High School is since they put it at the mid-mile, it's going to be really interesting to see how that functions. I hate to say maybe we're getting close to the end of our schools of large size in Meridian. So maybe it's too, will we learn something like that's the way we should have done the mousetrap, and by then it's almost too late? But it'll be interesting to see how it functions long-term on a mid-mile with two separate directions people could go. That might be the preferred way moving forward from that standpoint. Railwood Trail is still something that we are pursuing, but we've understand the challenges that exist. I mean, we've been looking at this one section, and we've been waiting for congressional time to pass is the best way I can put it before we can actually make investments. And that's created also challenges regionally with the timing where you have to give back funding and then get back in line again to make it happen. But I think long-term, it's still the right approach because I think that this corridor is still going to be the transportation corridor for a variety of things. So I would hate for us to ever give up on it, but just because I don't talk about it as much doesn't mean we're not investing time and resources into it. It's also just navigating that. Eventually, as a state, we have to solve this issue about what is this corridor going to be. If this is going to be our transportation corridor for bus or train or something else, then pedestrian and bicycle facilities should be part of that conversation. And that's where I think we'll really see the outcome the appropriate way. But in the meantime, I just encourage us to continue to look at those as they make sense to make those investments. You know, little things right over here where ProSource, Builders First Choice, they've changed their name a couple times with buyouts, but you know, they took the spur and they put it in on their property. You know, very nice and open up and whatnot. So stuff like that, if we do it correctly, can help in the long term, you know, for if that's what this looks like related to that. So.
Anyone else for the mayor? Mr. Lancaster.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have another question. Mr. Mayor, so I did watch your State of the City address. I watched it on YouTube. I wasn't there in person, but I watched it. So I remember you saying during the transportation part of your speech, and I'm paraphrasing, you'll remember what you said better than me, but speaking of Eagle Road and speed limits, things that you've already addressed here this afternoon, you said something to the effect of, you know, it seems to be kind of unique that Meridian has a high-speed highway through a business district. Am I close enough on that? Okay. So I'll get to my question here, but that seems to be, you know, a situation where land use filled in around the highway, which admittedly came across to me as a little bit like, you know, somebody building a house next to an airport and then complaining about the noise of the airplanes, right? And we see this pop up. You know, I've been on the commission long enough to have seen a couple of these come up where land use and transportation don't mix terribly well. I mean, right here we have City Hall with the employee parking lot across the street, and we've had, you know, conversations about that in this forum. So my question for you, and I don't ask this to put you on the spot or get you or anything, but I am interested in, you know, you as the executive of the city, your perspective or the city's perspective on this as far as, you know, what's the responsibility of the city, where the city hopefully determines land use. You know, so what's the responsibility of the city in a situation like what you described with, you know, a high-speed highway passing through a business district?
Chairman or Commissioner Lancaster, Mr. Chairman, yeah, I'm going to take a little bit of a cop-out on this because I think that the highway was there before Lake Fork, before Cascade, Donnelly. So every city grew up around a state highway, you know, but for the roadway, there was not a city that was there. So in a lot of ways, that every city has been around the road. The road was there almost before the city was there, because otherwise you couldn't get there. If you go back and say, well, you know, Eagle Road 20 years ago was just a simple road. You know, let's revert it back to that point and leave the land use the way it is. I don't think that they can just be looked at singularly to say that the land use is okay or this situation is there. The fact is, decisions were made about land use and this transportation network long before I became mayor. They've been evolving for 20 years with decisions that are being made. access continues to be challenged and some accesses are taken away. And I think you see city council having those conversations as they're, you know, the property that's transitioning from the old Chinese restaurant between Mattress Firm and trying to eliminate access points that make sense. So I think the city understands that we have a role and a function where we can to improve traffic flow, but at the same time, there's also a right to every property owner for them to have access if it's already exists. And I'll let ITD deal with the lawsuits that they get when access becomes a deciding factor. But we will continue to evaluate those situations and where we can where we can eliminate access what is not a deterrent to the property owner in a meaningful way. I think the city would be open to those conversations. And that's why I did talk about the state of the city. I talked about variable speed limits. I talked about access control, signage. I think all that is part of the equation when we start looking at things like Eagle Road about how do we improve it, how do we make it better. But the area from Overland to the railroad tracks has its own unique challenges, which is different from railroad tracks, you know, all the way down to say highway and where it intersects with Highway 44 down in Eagle. You know, it's such a congested area with the interstate, with a huge amount of businesses there, more coming on along. Well, what is the expectation for that area? You know, should it be functioning as a state highway or not? Or when Highway 16 is connected, should it no longer be a state highway at all? You know, I think that's a viable conversation that should be had at the appropriate time. And then it can be treated like, you know, Fairview, quite frankly. And that's really, in my viewpoint, you know, Eagle is Fairview. And Eagle is Yellowstone Avenue that runs through Pocatello. You know, these are all state highways which have, or at least started as state highways, which had, you know, business controlled access, some of it not, but you can have both and exist at a reasonable speed, as long as you don't have an expectation that it's an express highway. And that's why I think we shouldn't have that expectation. You know, if you look up north, you know, at the highway that comes out of Sandpoint and runs down into Coeur d'Alene, you know, that's a nice divided, limited control. But then once it gets closer into the city, it stops that. It slows down. It does have greater access. It's got more lights. And those are the things that, you know, land use, one way or the other, is always going to get it from that standpoint. So I don't know how I answered your question. I gave you a lot of words, a little bit of viewpoint, and, you know, a little bit of we'll continue to do what we can.
Anyone else? We've got a rare opportunity here.
Joseph, nothing?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lancaster.
if no one else has any questions, I do have another one that I'd like to ask.
Sir.
I see what I have to put up with here. So, Mr. Mayor, my third question for you, and this is something you talked about in the State of the City address and also with us today, talked about safety, and if my notes are right, you talked here about 3 different kinds of safety, or your 3 categories: engineered safety, fact-based safety, and council or constituent safety. Did I get those right?
Roughly, yeah.
Okay, close enough. So I'm curious, well, I'll tell you my definition of safety, and then I'm interested in yours. So, you know, I'm an engineer, so I guess I fall under engineered safety. So, you know, with regard to transportation, I have a very narrow definition as far as collisions that result in loss of life, injury, or loss of property, right? So to me, a near miss isn't a safety concern, it's a success, right? There wasn't a loss of life, an injury, or loss of property. So, you know, and then hopefully those are specific things that can be addressed through engineering, enforcement, or education. So that's my definition. I'm curious what your definition is when you talk about, safety of the transportation system.
Okay. And I don't know if I got Commissioner Lancaster, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if there's a specific definition, but I think downtown is a great example. People made a conscious decision that they didn't want cars driving 40 miles an hour, 35 miles an hour through downtown. So they found a way to slow cars down and put in speed limit expectations related to that. There's nothing that says this road couldn't have people going 35 miles per hour prior to putting in the center planners. Now it would probably be engineered. I think it would probably meet that definition, but people made conscious decisions about what is an acceptable speed limit to travel through there. It's no different than school zones. School zones, these are 5-lane roads that we're slowing down in the middle of the afternoon when people are out there. Those are conscious decisions that are made about reducing the ability for an accident to happen, even though the road network says it's fine. That's what I'm really talking about, is finding those areas of our community where it makes sense to slow the traffic down, even though the road can be engineered or designed to go at a faster rate, because it makes common sense. I mean, that's the thing. School districts is a common sense to slow down when we have people interacting, when we increase the car volume traffic, or we have people trying to cross the road, or we do those things. And that's why when I talk about the area between the village and Kleiner Park as an example, that area seems like a common sense area where having a reduced traffic speed makes sense, even though right now it's listed at 35 to go through that space. That to me, it's the best I got for you. I don't want to use, I guess you could use the old adage, can't tell you what porn is, but when you see it, it's kind of that same thing. You see those areas of our community where you say, that just doesn't make sense for us to be doing it that way. The Eagle Road, it doesn't make sense to be posted 55 miles per hour for 12 hours of the day. Maybe for the other 12 it does, but for the other 12 it doesn't. And where do we make common sense decisions or policies or everything that just say, we just need to alter that, because that's for the best of everyone around us. That 5 miles per hour is not going to impact anybody's ability to move safely through our community. It's not going to delay people from getting to their work in a way if that's the case. So hopefully that helps.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Mayor, thank you for fielding my questions today, and thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys again, and enjoy the rest of your meeting today.
We may prevail upon you for possible annual
Happy to do it.
comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, next item on the agenda is the transportation projects update from Mrs. Carson.
All right, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I think the mayor stole my thunder on most of these updates, but I'm going to go ahead and give them to you anyways. The Linder Overland to Franklin design notice to proceed has been issued. I'm on page 6. 10-mile road, Overland to Lamont is open for traffic. Some work in that full mile section is still ongoing. The McMillan Black Cat intersection, there's a design update there in your packet. A multi-lane roundabout was chosen for that intersection. There are not a lot of construction updates right now, but we do have a lot of projects that are going through design. ITD updates, I have a few that were sent to me after I had a chance to put the memo together. So I have a few updates that you might not see there in the memo, but the Linder Road to Locust Grove, the Chinden West project, Phase 2 of Meridian Road to Locust Grove, construction bid is going to be opening in June of 2022. So hopefully we'll see that project getting underway. Star Road to Idaho 16. Construction is expected to be complete in the summer of 2024. The Idaho Highway 16 extension, the bids for the I-84 to Franklin and U-Stick to Chinden opened in May, and those contracts are expected to be complete in March of 2024. And on the State Highway 69 traffic study, we've seen some progress on that recently, and ITD is expected to have a project presentation to their board on June 15th, at the June 15-16 board meetings. That's a 2-day board meeting that they hold. And then they do anticipate to bring a briefing to the city sometime in the summer of this year as to the update on that project. And then the last thing I will note on page 11, as the mayor said, the transit fixed line local route is going to be launching in October of this year. That's Route 30 from the 10-mile interchange area through the village, through downtown to the village. And I can stand for any questions on those updates.
Questions from Ms. Carson? Thank you, ma'am. You covered one that I had on my list. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item is under old business as well, the Linder Road air compression brake noise complaint. What do we know?
So in May, the Transportation Commission, you all discussed this issue. There was a citizen complaint regarding the noise from compression brakes coming down the hill on Linder, south of Overland. After the discussion, it was requested that the citizen bring forward some more information, and Ms. Anderson is in the audience. No. Ms. Anderson was supposed to be in the audience. So it sounds like she is not here. The information I did get from her was that the concern was happening between 7:15 and 9 a.m. on weekdays. She did not catch the construction company. She just said it was a brown construction truck. So I do believe, after speaking with her further, that the complaint is largely from the construction that's going on to the, I believe it's
It didn't sound like
northwest.
farm equipment or something like that.
She said it looked like construction trucks from
Okay.
from her kitchen window. So my guess is that that's going on northwest of her where there's some construction going on. So I'm not sure that it's going to be a long-term issue. It might just be a short-term problem. But for the sake of enforcement, I know it was requested for the times, and that was reported to me to be between 7:15 and 9.
Commissioners? Thoughts?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lancaster?
I'm interested in what we're wanting the outcome to this agenda item to be. Are we trying to make a decision today? Are we having a discussion? Are we, is this on the agenda so that we could listen to testimony? What are we trying to accomplish?
It's on the agenda because the commission had questions at the last meeting for more information. We've gotten a smidgen, but not much more. I personally would like to see us get it to some point and not just blow it off as thank you for telling us and we'll see you down the road. Sergeant, what's the possibility for a little bit of detective work? I know it's not your division, but would you like a little bit?
Well, this information helps us at least have an idea of the time frame of when the complaints are coming in. Maybe it's something that I could reach out to Miranda and get the citizens' information and contact them personally and gather a little bit more information before we just send somebody up there to try and enforce this. As you guys know, our resources are limited, and we try to get the biggest bang for our buck with where we deploy those resources. So we want to be as efficient as possible, and we also want to help the citizen out as best we can.
Not asking for more than you're comfortable giving.
Mr. Chair, if I may also.
Yes, ma'am.
Just for the sake of clearing the air of any concern that we would be blowing off the citizen request, we did research the legalities of putting up those signs. The city does have code prohibiting those air compression brakes because of complaints that were brought forward in the past. So this issue has been addressed already. And the issue of the sign was something that we did research the options for that. And it's not an option in this location because they need to be done. They need to coincide with welcome signs, and that's not an entry point for the city limits.
Mr. Hood, I see you. Let me make a comment. This may help set up your answer. If I'm not mistaken, the top of that hill at that irrigation ditch is a city limit. There's another city limit south of that. The way Meridian is checkerboarded, you move in and out of the city constantly, apparently. What would be the possibility of moving the welcome sign to the top of that hill and putting a compression brake sign on it?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you. Yeah, that's what I was coming forward to discuss with you before Miranda made those last comments. I actually was in that seat when we talked about it last time. So that is kind of the idea. We did reach out to the complainant and tried to get some more information and got a smidge, I think you said, more information. We are in the process of buying some more Welcome to Meridian signs, the 2x3 metal signs that are out there. There is potential to move the one that's near the bottom of the hill to top of the hill there, because today that's pretty close to city limits, but that's not going to be the long-term location for that sign. So probably within a couple years or so, we would move that sign south, further south, south of Victory towards Amity and eventually Lake Hazel and point south as city limits continue to grow. So this isn't a long-term solution, which may be fine because it may be associated with construction that's occurring in this general vicinity, but there is an opportunity if you wanted to co-locate. And I know Mr. Wasson was part of some of that dialogue too, and co-locating one of these new updated welcome signs and adding the compression brakes prohibited per city ordinance or whatever the exact language is on those signs to the nearer the top of the hill. ACHD helps us, one, install those, but also locate them so they don't block speed limit signs or other regulatory signs. So there is an opportunity. Again, I just wanted to temper expectations a little bit that it won't be there forever, though, if you do direct us to move the sign near the top of the hill.
The way Meridian is changing and growing, it may not be there at lunch tomorrow. Does ACHD have any comment on this at the moment? Don't have to make any, just thought I'd make sure.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for asking. We can install the sign. We do have to have the city council request a sign go up at that location. We just don't install them at every city limit, but if the city requests at that location, we would install it. If the city moves south 2 miles from now, next week, I like gas going to $6, but if the city moves south, then the city would have to enact an ordinance or a line in their ordinance requesting ACHD to install no compression brakes at a point other than the city limit. And we can do that. What's the maximum effective range of the sign? Realistically, probably 0.00 meters. Because unless there's somebody out there to enforce that sign, my experience based upon over 21 years of doing this job is they just don't tend to be very effective. And as a matter of fact, Idaho Transportation Department will no longer install any compression brake signs in the state. And with saying that, any signs that they come across during maintenance operations, I've been given notice that they would remove those on the state highway.
Thank you. Commissioners?
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Leclerc?
so it's construction activity. If we dug around, we might find that whatever company is doing that work is working on a conditional use permit for the city. There may be another way to get at this if we have an ongoing dialogue with whoever that construction company is. Anyway, it might be a way to say, look, stop using your brakes. And so that just came to mind with the time frame she gave and the type of business that it is. I think there's a good chance we're already working with whoever that company is for them. And that's probably the other side of that coin is it's probably a short-term thing, as was mentioned. And so maybe 6 months or a year is long enough to have the sign there. Let them know that this is the rule and follow it. And, you know, I'm sure the signs have almost no impact for 95% of the, or higher of the drivers that go by it because they don't have compression brakes in their vehicle. But these guys do, and if they see it, they'll probably get the message that there've been complaints. And once now that we might have a patrol car nearby, we can inform them more directly that they have complaints. So I think we're making progress. I just don't know. I don't have any objection to moving that sign, even if it's less than a year. It may help the neighbors.
Thank you, sir. Other comments? Mr. Lewis, I'm looking right at you. You can say no.
No, sir.
You have anything?
No, sir, I don't have anything.
Okay. Not ignoring you. I'm just wanting to make sure somebody else has an opportunity. Mr. Lancaster.
Mr. Chairman, I do have several thoughts about this, and like you, I'm wanting to let everyone else speak too, because I do have some pretty strong thoughts on this. Yeah, maybe this is because I'm a freshly reappointed commissioner, and so you can't kick me off for 3 more years. But, you know, our ordinance does allow for citizens, experts, community leaders, business leaders, whatnot, to be on our commission. I'd like to think that in some of these transportation things, I can bring an expert perspective. Perhaps you guys might judge otherwise, but hopefully this is one where I can. Weren't supposed to nod that vigorously, Commissioner LeClaire. Thank you. Yeah. So, traffic control devices, meaning signs, signals, pavement markings, have specific purposes, and those purposes are to direct highway and road users how to use the highways and roads. So for instance, regulatory signs such as one-way signs or speed limits or curve warning signs or guide signs, they direct users how to use the facility. Traffic control devices are usually not used to educate or spread messages or convey messages that aren't specific to use of the road, including, you know, vehicle related or driver behavior kind of messages, such as, you know, wear your seatbelt or don't text and drive, or you know, compression brakes, frankly. So using a sign in that way is really contrary to how traffic control devices are supposed to be used. Traffic control devices, again, meaning signs, signals, and pavement markings. And so usually use of signs to convey things like laws or ordinances are usually inappropriate because those laws and ordinances are applicable and enforceable whether there's a sign or not. You know, some examples are compression brake limitations, bicycle or scooter limitations, radio or cell phone limitations, littering, dark sky requirements, shooting, hunting, fishing, or camping limitations. So there's lots and lots, right? Further, and I do remember that our recommendation from this commission regarding the compression brakes ordinance that was eventually passed was, our recommendation was do not pass. Because we had several concerns about the enforceability, the applicability, the lawfulness of such an ordinance. And those, I still have those concerns. For example, 42 US Code 4917 appears to explicitly prohibit state or local or agencies from creating more restrictive regulations on compression brakes or noise regulations without the consent of the governing body. So, and there's existing regulations on noise emission from commercial vehicles. So I come at this in two ways. So it's not an appropriate use for a traffic control device. And two, the ordinance is questionably legal as is. I would think that if challenged, it may not stand. Now, the probability of it being challenged is probably small because Sergeant Dance's predecessor, told us as a commission that it's a basically unenforceable ordinance unless an officer is there at the time that the incident occurs and somehow has a way to measure the sound emission, right? That it's a feel-good law, not an enforceable law. So for those reasons, I would encourage or discourage our commission from recommending placing compression brake limitation signs at this location or at any other locations in the city.
The other commissioners? Ms. Carson, I think you've got your answer. No action.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, next item on the agenda is new business. Sergeant Dance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually don't have anything specific for you guys today. So
Okay.
unless you have any questions for me.
Questions for the sergeant? Do I dare? Tom, you got anything? It's okay, you don't have to. Mr. Lancaster.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I'm uncomfortable with this being so much about me today, but I do have some specific questions because we've had a lot of.
It's not about you, it's about traffic issues by you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that clarification. So there are some things that have been talked about and that will be talked about coming up in the agenda that I'm interested in Sergeant Dance's perspective on. So Sergeant Dance, we just had the mayor in here talk about various transportation issues. We also have coming up on our agenda conversation about the area around Hillside Elementary, or Hillsdale, I'm sorry, and the YMCA. I see that there's a staff communication about pedestrian crossing of Amity Road. And so I'm curious if you have any perspective on, those two locations, as well as, and I don't want to put you on the spot with this, but the mayor talked about safety on Eagle Road. And so I guess there's three things that I would be interested in a police perspective on, a current police perspective on.
The Eagle Road one it's a complicated issue. I don't think there's really one way to solve it and make everybody happy. I think it's a discussion that we've had for many years now, and we probably will for many more years to come. I think everybody's goal is to make it as safe as possible. From an enforcement standpoint, I can tell you that just strictly with the congestion on Eagle Road, it's very difficult to do a lot of enforcement, to be proactive. It's very difficult to get around in traffic and to turn around on vehicles who might be speeding or committing violations, just for the fact of, is it worth it to try and spin around on this car, to turn around on this car, when now you could potentially be creating more problems for the traffic and the vehicles around you. So I think the real solutions will be in the engineering aspect and the education aspect there. We do a lot of enforcement on Eagle Road, but a lot of times it's reactionary enforcement from crashes and things of that nature. So that's a conversation I think we'll continue to have. It's a challenging one, of course. The Hillsdale Elementary, I don't know a lot about the specifics of the issues there, other than we want to, sounds like there's some issues with safety and pedestrian crossing and kids getting to school safely. Do we need crosswalks in certain locations, and how, can the school have crossing guards available at those locations? And so I think there's more that goes into that as well. And, as a city where we have, I want to say 31 schools within city limits, that's an issue at every school. And from time to time, we get specific complaints from schools or neighbors of schools about specific traffic complaints, and we do our best to be proactive and enforce those when possible. So again, those are issues I think we will continue to have, and we'll continue to do our best at providing our services as a police department. I can't remember, what was the third location?
Mr. Chairman, Sergeant Dance, the third location, and it's a discussion coming up in our packet, but pedestrian crossing location on Amity between Eagle and Locust Grove, I think I'm remembering right. Do you see pedestrians? Do you see pedestrian issues? That sort of thing.
Well, I might reserve my opinion then for when we get to that topic and get into more specifics.
Mr. Chairman, that's A-okay with me. Thank you, Sergeant Dance.
Okay. Anything else, Sergeant? Until later. Mr. Leclerc.
So it sounded like, well, need to beat a dead horse, but I too voted against the compression record. I think it's not a good piece of law either, also. And, but we have information now about some noise on Linder Road. Sounds like you said it already, but I just want to confirm. The effort will be to monitor Linder Road on morning hours for this complaint from the citizen.
I presume the sergeant, as he has personnel available in that neighborhood, might very well mention it to them to see what they can hear.
Yeah, that's correct. I'd like to reach out to the complainant and talk over some of the solutions or the things that we might be able to do to help her out, and help her understand what's reasonable as far as what we can do. But I'm happy to do that.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else for Sergeant Dance? Okay, moving along, item number 5 under new business, ACHD Capital Improvement Plan update. Mr. Miller, welcome. Yeah, you need to pick one of those mics and work directly with it. Thank you.
This one on? Okay.
Yes, it's on.
All right. Thank you all for having me today. My name is Austin Miller. I am the Impact Fee Administrator for the Ada County Highway District. I also do oversee our capital improvements plan, which we currently have a draft revision that we've been working on. So I'm here before you today to give you a quick summary of what we're considering. A quick overview of what I'll discuss, sort of initially just how we got here, what the commission direction was to staff. I'll give a very quick overview of what the capital improvements plan and impact fee ordinance are. I'll review a couple of the potential changes that are being considered. One of them is a bit more predominant than the other, so that one will get a little bit of special attention, and then I'll go over the next steps. So back in August, during the review of ACHD's budget, the ACHD Commission directed staff to have a new impact fee ordinance and capital improvements plan to go live June 1st. Obviously, as of today's date, we certainly have not met that goal. The commission actually postponed it until July 1st and then recently postponed it at least another 2 months. So we're looking sometime more in the September-October timeframe on when this is going to go live. Given that staff only had a little under a year to actually work on this, it's just an interim update. We didn't do a full comprehensive update to everything. So quick little summary, what are impact fees? So impact fees are fees that we assess to development in order to ensure they're paying for their proportionate share of our system improvement costs. Per state statute, impact fee ordinances are allowed in the state of Idaho. However, they do have to have a capital improvements plan on which they are based. So the capital improvements plan will list all of the projects that we are planning on constructing in the next 20 years. It'll also estimate the costs for those projects, and then it will specify what portion of those costs are actually impact fee eligible, therefore borne by the development community, versus what costs are fall to the general fund. State statute does prohibit us from using the impact fees for anything other than the system improvements to serve growth. So if we're replacing a 2-lane road to widen it to 5 lanes, we cannot use impact fees for replacing the existing 2 lanes. That is a maintenance cost, not the cost of development. It also can't be used to cure existing deficiencies. So if a road is already over its acceptable level of service, correcting that is not something that we can expend impact fees on. Impact fees can also only be spent on projects that are outlined in the capital improvements plan. One of the most common requests I get is when a new development is going in, neighbors will want to know, do their impact fees potentially close this existing sidewalk gap in our neighborhood or something of the sort. We can't do it for those type projects. Our CIP only includes arterial roadways. This is a quick overview of the projects in our current CIP. You can see there's 244 projects, approximately 95 of which are within Meridian's area of impact. There's a total cost of about $1.2 billion. Again, that is split between what is impact fee eligible and what falls to the general fund. So some of the changes, none of the added projects are in the city of Meridian. We just are adding an intersection in a portion of Technology Way that's out over by Micron and Boise. There are a few updates to roads that in our master street map were listed as 5 lanes, yet our capital improvements plan only had listed for 3. So we're bringing those up to be consistent with each other, or at least we're considering that. Other potential changes, so any projects that are under construction currently and we've already paid out a portion of them, I've reduced those project costs to only the remaining balance. I've also removed all projects that have already been completed and paid for since our last adoption. We've also updated the service area balance. That's just our bank account. And then there are a few items, I typically refer to them just as miscellaneous items because there are a couple in my calculations that we're increasing the impact fee eligibility of them. The easiest way, at least for me to think about them, is if we're widening a roadway and there's an obstruction, for example, and we need to remove, relocate, replace, there's costs borne there. If we were just doing a maintenance project, ACHD wouldn't have those costs. They are a cost because of the widening, therefore those should be 100% impact fee eligible. Currently, they're a percentage base, so we've gone through and adjusted our formula a little bit to get that corrected. And then our impact fees are also based on vehicle trip generation in accordance with the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual. Our current ordinance and fee schedule are based on the 10th edition. Since that adoption, the 11th edition has come out, so we are bringing that up to date with the most recent data provided. The one other item that is the most impactful being considered is funding a list of projects that are currently unfunded for design and construction costs. As you can see here, it's a little under $200 million currently listed as unfunded. If the commission does elect to fund all of these projects for their design and construction, that will have, quite frankly, the greatest impact to what our fees are that we're assessing. Just for a point of clarification, all of these projects are still in our capital improvements plan as corridor preservation. So regardless of funding, design, and construction, we are preserving for the land if they are needed. So these numbers, I would like to first emphasize, please don't take them for exact. Spreadsheet that I have saved is already slightly different. The stuff on our website, I think, is about $6 different for a single family home. These are more just budgetary to get you a good idea of what to expect and the impacts. You can see the current fees listed there. The middle column is all of the items I had discussed. However, leaving the unfunded list, just that. It is staying unfunded. You can see it's not a tremendous change in our impact fee schedule. However, the right column is if the commission elects to fund all of those currently unfunded projects, you can see what impacts that will have to our impact fee schedule. We are currently striving for a July 27th public hearing. And then that is actually on our website right now for public review and comment. So if any of you haven't taken a look at that yet and are interested, please feel free, review it, provide any comments you may have. They would be greatly appreciated. You can find that on our website if you just go to achdIdaho.org or Google us. We have a quick links tab. It's the second bullet down on there. And then another just opportunity for involvement. As I mentioned, this is just an interim update. However, following Compass's Communities in Motion 2050 approval, if that takes place, I believe its anticipated adoption is in December. We typically follow up on that with starting our next major update. So I fully expect in about a year's time, I'll be starting this process all over again, just going a little bit more in depth given the new data that we hope to have at that time. And with that, I do have my email address there below. Certainly feel free to let me know anytime if you have any questions. And for the moment, I will stand if you have any for me.
Any questions for Mr. Miller? Mr. Lancaster?
Mr. Chairman, I just can't help myself today. Yeah, sometimes yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, Austin, perhaps this is a silly question, but is there any sort of requirement where the fees collected have to be spent within a certain radius of where they're collected, or, you know, if they're collected from a development in Meridian, can they be spent in southeast Boise, or, you know, do they have to be spent within some distance of the development?
Commissioner, this is a typical topic of conversation. So service areas, ACHD used to have them as part of our impact fee ordinance. I can't remember how many the county was split into. However, I think it was in 2012, the ACHD Commission decided to consolidate the county into one countywide service area. So impact fees paid in Meridian can be spent in Boise and vice versa. That is an item that has specifically been requested to be addressed, I would anticipate, fairly heavily with the next major update. However, we weren't considering service areas as part of this interim one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Austin.
Anyone else? Questions for Mr. Miller? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Go spend the money well. Okay, next item on our agenda is the Amity Road and Marsala Avenue crosswalk request. Would you happen to be Mrs. Craig? Miranda, do you want to set this up or let her just start doing it? She can just start. Welcome. We need your name and address, please, and then you've got the floor.
I'll give you my name, Samantha Craig.
Is she on the mic? Is she on the mic? I can't quite.
Maybe I need to get closer.
That's better.
Okay.
Thank you. You live where?
Okay, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Thank you for having me. So my name is Samantha Craig. I live in Meridian. I'm a mother, and then I'm also a physician at St. Luke's. And the reason I'm here today is to request a crosswalk at Amity Road in between Eagle and Locust Grove. I put together a brief PowerPoint with some visuals to be helpful. So specifically, what I'm requesting is a hawk pedestrian crossing on Amity Road. And this is near the intersection with Eagle Road. And I'm requesting it to be a priority and something that could be done in the very near future. As you probably know, there is an Albertsons that is almost completed at the northwest corner of Amity and Eagle. And this is going to be bringing a lot more foot traffic and bicycle traffic coming from a lot of the subdivisions on my side of the road on Amity, going in that direction. And Amity at this section is a 55 mile per hour speed limit, so it's very unsafe to cross. There also is Sienna Elementary, which is in the Tuscany neighborhood. There was a cap on Hillsdale, and so a lot of people in the subdivision surrounding me are going to Siena, and there's no safe way to get to Sienna Elementary. So this crosswalk would serve several different neighborhoods that are interconnected. Those are White Bark, Sky Mesa, Calistoga, East Ridge, and Black Rock. And so I put together a little map showing where I think the best location for that crosswalk would be. And that's at the red arrow. And so that would be going from Marsala Way, which is the entrance to White Bark, and connecting across the street to a bike path that is in Castle Creek subdivision. And once you get across, you can cut through the neighborhoods and get to both Sienna Elementary and also the Albertsons. I'm sure you know the sidewalk is not contiguous through that stretch. So hopefully eventually we could take the sidewalk to get to Albertsons. But in the meantime, we could at least cut through the neighborhood. So here's a picture with my handsome husband. And so this is the bike path at Castle Creek. And this is where I'm suggesting the crosswalk be placed going into the White Bark subdivision. And I've identified one other area that would be a possible location. I just don't think it's quite as good. There's a bike path that travels behind Calistoga subdivision, and that could be connected to the bike path in Tuscany. It is diagonal and not a straight shot though. And here's a picture of those paths. So the photo on the right is the bike path behind Calistoga. And then the photo on the left is where it would need to connect to the bike path in Tuscany.
Let me interrupt you with one question.
Mhm.
Are your locations 1 and 2 in either or?
I think one would be the optimal place, but either way.
You're not suggesting both, you're,
No, either or, sorry. Yeah,
thank you.
this is just two options. I think the first location would be the best option, but
Okay.
just one crosswalk. And that's all I have.
okay, let me, if I may ask you a couple of questions, get some clarity. In an email that we've been given a copy of, ACHD said that there is a design scheduled for 2026 to address your situation. First question, you probably understand more about this than I do, not living down there. Is what they're talking about, not the timing, but what they're talking about, would it address your concern?
I know they said an advanced bicycle and pedestrian facilities. I don't know exactly what that entails. If it entails a crosswalk, then that's what would work. I'm just asking for it a lot sooner than 2026.
I understand that,
Mhm.
but I'm talking about the what.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know exactly what is included in that.
Mr. Hood, do you have any information about my question? Okay, Miranda?
No, sir, that design hasn't,
Okay.
if it has begun, it's not far enough down the road, no pun intended, to know exactly where a crossing would be or if a crossing would be included.
Mr. Watson?
I do not, Commissioner. What I can tell you, though, is that we would have to have pedestrian facilities on both receiving portions of Amity to be able to put a crosswalk out there and still make it compatible with the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Okay. Commissioners, questions of Mrs. Craig? Mr. Lancaster?
Mr. Chairman, this isn't necessarily a question for Mrs. Cragg, but I do have a question as far as, do we have this on the city's priority list for projects? And if so, where do we have it on the list? Perhaps staff knows, or perhaps Commissioner Smith, who chairs that subcommittee and is at home and hopefully is in front of his computer, might have an answer to that.
Yeah, I'm looking for that right now. I'm trying to find the specific item. I have the spreadsheet in front of me. But I'm struggling at the moment to find the specific one.
Give me a moment. If you find
yeah.
it, let me know, and I'll look to staff to see if they know.
Absolutely. Um, So I only see one in terms of in terms of Siena, I see a crosswalk on Capulet Way that is 14th in our, as of November, the one that the plan that we sent um, to ACHD. And as of the November sheet, it looks like that was not programmed. So 2026 looks like it might be an advancement of that. I'm not sure if that is the specific one.
Mr. Chair, that Capulet crossing is at a different location.
It's a different, okay.
I'm working on pulling up our integrated five-year work plan request, just to look at what we have already requested as a city for that location.
Mr. Chair, if I can add a couple more things, I'll pull
Mr. Hood.
some of this information up. So a couple of other things to consider. I've asked Miranda to pull up the GIS layer too. I wanted a couple of things. The pathway that she mentions that goes along the 10 Mile Creek, that is part of the city's master pathway plan. So I'm not saying A or B, but just to put that in context, the Parks Department does envision crossing Amity nearer the 10 Mile Creek there long-term. So option A may be a better short-term, once we get into design of Amity, maybe the Hawk signal goes at the 10 Mile though, because that is a regional pathway connection that will eventually go all the way, again, through Meridian. So just something to consider there. And again, a picture is gonna be worth 1,000 words here, but there's an orange, this orange dash, I think Miranda's pulling it up, is the 10-foot multi-use pathway that our Parks Department has. The other thing that you'll see is the yellow, and I don't know how feasible this is because essentially ACHD puts in a roundabout, just drops a roundabout where an intersection is generally planned. There's not going to likely be a roundabout right where it's shown. So again, as we get into design of this mile between Eagle and Locust Grove, they'll either put a signal or roundabout maybe probably not at Marsala because I think that the northern entrance I think was just temporary for them. Maybe a roundabout in this area too. So some of those offsets would need to be considered. It may be at Abbott, so they just missed it a little bit. That may be, again, a signal or a roundabout in the future. We're getting pretty close to the Eagle Road intersection now there though. So again, I don't think this has even been scoped as far as where intersections are gonna go and crossings and things like that. Just wanted to point that out. So again, what you see on your screen, the orange, so the red here along the 10 Mile Creek is the existing pathway. So there's asphalt there today. And then the dash orange is future. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And you can see a crossing then to go from the multi-use pathway, some crossing of Amity here in the future at that location. I'm not saying either one couldn't work. Just something to consider is that our parks, with their master planning of the pathway network, envisions one generally along the 10 Mile.
Ms. Craig, the one he's showing, can you see his screen? The one he's showing along 10 Mile Creek is not your second option.
That is my second.
That was your second option? Okay.
That'd be great.
So, Mr. Hood, are you saying that the 10 Mile Creek, when you're talking about, is something that's under the control of the city?
It's not under the control of the city. The city has a pathways master plan. And, oh, I'm sorry, I know the question was directed to Mr. Hood. The city has a pathway master plan, and that's what the dotted orange line is showing, the future plan. And so they did envision a crossing at that location. That doesn't mean that we have control over crossing. We do work with developers and we work with ACHD to make sure that projects that are already going through coordinate with those pathway crossings.
In this respect, the city does not own a paintbrush and a can of paint.
Well, Mr. Chair, if I can put a finer point on that a little bit. So when, so yes, the developer puts in that pathway. when the pathway actually goes from section to section, so in this case, it would go from Amity, and I don't remember if it actually goes up to Victory or over to Locust Grove. But wherever it comes out, when that mile segment is done, that developer or that HOA, usually at that point, petitions the city to take that over. Our Parks Department usually doesn't want to take over ownership and maintenance until it connects to two major points to arterial roadways. So developer puts it in, once they get all their phases built out and it connects from arterial to arterial, they say, we're done with it. Here's city, you take it, maintain it in perpetuity. So we do kind of own the paintbrush, but only up until then it touches the ACHD right away. And those crossings, we have to coordinate with ACHD or bridges with the irrigation district and so on and so forth. So didn't want to get in the weeds too much there, but just so you understand who has authority in some of those things.
Very helpful.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
John
sir.
Wassenada County Highway District. I'd like to recommend that as we work on this project, that if the city is desirous of this as a crossing site, we discuss it early, because we have placed similar type crossings in the city at the city's behest. The best one that I can think of just off the top of my head is the James Court crossing, the PHB at James Court off of Meridian Road. We put that in a couple of years ago at the request of the city. And I believe we also put one out on 10 Mile by the wastewater plant. So I mean, those are certainly options that we can consider. And in the planning phase, it's certainly a whole lot cheaper to plan for it than go in and retrofit it after we get the project done.
Mr. Chair, I've pulled up that example of James Court and Meridian Road there just for,
And Mr. Chair, I think there may be a couple of things going on though, because again, that section of Amity, we can't find it in ACHD's plans to really do anything in the near term, and it's not on our priority list as a city up until this came more to our attention. This may be a do something in the interim and then work with ACHD in the longer term on something like you see at James Court for the Bud Porter. Because that was done, there was an interim one, but even when that was widened to 5 lanes recently, we worked with ACHD to make sure that that was the ultimate location for that crossing and worked in with the network, so.
So, Mr. Hood, back to my original question of Mrs. Craig, the ACHD email that we were given a copy of, it's starting to appear that the person that wrote this wasn't speaking of a specific crossing, a specific thing, and all we were looking at was saying, please move it up. It's a little more out there, but we still in a position to be able to ask that they get on it. I think that was a question. Mr. Wass.
Chairman, John Wassenada County Highway District. I'd have to get with Meg, who is our ped bike coordinator, but she discusses that for 2026, and that's probably a 2027, 2028 project by the time we get done with the right-of-way, because generally design's a year, right-of-way is a year, and then construction is a year to 18 months, depending on what type of road we're rebuilding. And if we're rebuilding a mile of an arterial and making it either a 3 or a 5 lane, and I don't know what it would be at this point in time, there will be some heavy lifting on the design portion. But to put an interim out there, we still have to meet ADA compliance and have some sort of pedestrian facilities out there so that it meets the federal ADA requirements.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question? I'm still looking at staff. They were huddled. Anything,
We were just,
anything come out of that last huddle?
no, Mr. Chair, we were
Okay.
just discussing the pathway to the south, if it had been completed or not. On this plan, it's still showing as a planned pathway, that dotted line, but from the pictures that Ms. Cragg shared, it looks like that was completed with the development there just to the south of Amity. Must have been completed recently.
Mr. Ballard?
There's not. There's nowhere to cross, no.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Ms. Craig, I live in that area, so I go out that Marsala. I don't think there's a pedestrian facility directly across from Marsala. There's a sidewalk over there, but getting to that sidewalk straight across, I don't think there's any way to do that current. Is that correct? Am I correct on that?
When you say pedestrian facility, I don't know exactly what you mean by that.
Well, there's no, is there a, so they put a road in over there? They put curb and gutter in over there on that, straight across from Marsala?
There's a little bit of a sidewalk, and then you can go directly onto a bike path into Castle Creek.
Does your picture you had show it? Can we get her picture back up?
Mr. Chair, it looks like it's a micropath into the neighborhood here.
Bring up the picture item, there you go, 4. There we go. Is that what you're,
Yeah.
so I guess the question is, just past that bollard that we're looking at in front of your husband, is that a curb that just drops off?
It's a grassy area, and there is a little bit of a ditch.
So there needs to be some work done.
So it wouldn't meet ADA. So, Mr. Watson, so in terms of being able to put a crosswalk there, it's going to need to meet ADA at least in the foreground.
Mr. Commissioner President John Wasson, ACHD, yes, it would have to. And we would not just stripe a crosswalk across a road that has a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit or higher. That would not be best practice, and it's not something that, as an engineer, in any way, shape, or form, I would ever recommend.
So let me try to, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this or not. It appears that the ACHD email we got was not talking about a specific project addressing this situation in any time frame. It was saying there's going to be a project out in that area eventually. I was trying to go to, it's going to happen. We can just try to move it up if we wish to, but it doesn't look like there's something that's going to happen that can be moved up at this moment. But
We won't.
so staff, what if anything can the Transportation Commission do with this, even if they wanted to?
It sounds like, and Mr. Watson can correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like we could request an interim treatment similar to the James Court Meridian Road. If the commission recommends that, we could take that to council and have council recommend an interim crossing. The concern would be that there's not likely sidewalks that go down to that. So residents would, I apologize, I'm gonna click back here for a second. Residents in this neighborhood would need to come down and go out to that bike path rather than trying to travel down Amity, because there is a gap in sidewalks here, if I'm not mistaken. But if we wanted to request an interim treatment, I believe we could recommend city council do that. Is that?
Mr. President, John Wasson, Ada County Highway District. Yes, the city could always request the highway district put in an interim, and you'd have to prioritize it on your priority list, and then we would see what we could do to make it happen.
Okay, commissioners, you have plenty of information to state any kind of desire at all? Mr. Ballard, please.
Is there a pathway forward for Ms. Bragg to proceed on? I've heard a lot of suggestions, but it seems like it's out in the future. Is there something that she can walk away and say, I've got some ideas on how I can move forward on this, or her community, her neighborhood move forward on it, or is she back to the drawing board on it? I'm just looking for a suggestion.
I think Ms. Carson had an idea of how to do it. Lancaster, where are you when I need you?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Lewis.
I think the path forward is that the commission recommend an interim pedestrian hybrid beacon at the Marsala crossing from the bike path.
Mr. Chair.
Southward, and that we, and that in a couple of months, when we do our priority lists again, that we put this towards the top of the community programs list.
Mr. Chair.
Is that a motion?
It can be. Yes.
We have a motion, we have a second question from Ms. Carson. Does that work?
I do have one question. I think that we're more likely to be successful, and I could be wrong, this is my opinion. I think we're more likely to be successful getting an interim treatment where there's not going to be curb cuts needed. So where there's already curb cuts at location 1 at the Marsala and the bike path, there would have to be a curb cut for that. For an interim treatment, I think we might be more successful getting it here at the bike path where the 10 Mile Creek pathway connects. And because that's a location where our parks is already designated a crossing, I think we might be more successful there, but.
Mr. Hood?
So, Mr. Chair, I guess if it turns into a motion, or maybe that already was, because I heard a second, I thought.
It is a motion and a second. I'm just trying to get staff clarity on what we're motioning.
And I guess my request would be is that we're less clear. We can option A, B, or maybe an option C somewhere in this general vicinity and let ACHD go out there, ground truth it and go, here's where it should go. It's going to be within a couple hundred feet of where she's requesting it. So ACHD, rather than being specific to say right at Marsala or right at the back path, somewhere right here and let them do something if they can.
Mr. Lewis?
Mr. Chairman, I'm willing to amend my motion to have it either at location 1 or location 2, whichever proves to be the better one.
Or 3, should it develop?
Sure.
Mr. Ballard?
I'll amend my second then.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lancaster?
I'm admittedly a little bit disturbed by what Mr. Wasson has brought us as far as making a direct request to jump the line of all of the community program projects that we have previously prioritized. How's that for peas? And this will come to light as we talk about agenda number 7, where we will talk about our number 1 prioritized community program project. So I am not, well, and so there's a motion on the floor, so I can't ask questions before we vote on the motion, but, you know, I'm, other than Mrs. Craig's family shown in the photos, I don't know what demand there is here. Demand for pedestrian, pedestrian demand. And I have stated in this commission that I'm uncomfortable using pedestrian crossing treatments for bicycle facilities. You know, the more formal name for a hawk signal is pedestrian hybrid beacon. So it is a treatment specific to pedestrians. So I don't have enough information to recommend this at this time. I'm also, again, uncomfortable moving a project out of the blue to the tip top of our list above what we've previously ranked as, our top project and top projects. So I will be voting against this motion, and I have my own suggestion if the motion fails, but I'll wait till then.
Thank you, sir. Other commissioners? Mr. Ballard?
I'm a little confused. To me, it seems like there's two issues. One is some temporary fast lane.
Mr. Chairman, I think that the question of the priority is for the interim project, if I'm not mistaken.
And Mr. Chairman, whether interim or permanent, I don't think it matters. To take with all due respect to Mrs. Craig, a project that walked in the door and to move it to the top of the list, whether it's interim or permanent, I think is irrelevant. We prioritize those projects a certain way for a reason. I think we could add projects to our list in the future, but that's not the question on the floor at the moment. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Lewis?
Hopkins, but that'll work. So,
Your voices are so similar that
when we meet to prioritize, we would take up.
Mr.
Number two, is there any special rules on bike paths?
Commissioner Hopkins, Chairman John Wasson, Ada County Highway District. I will admit that I'm not the expert on that. However, we are being asked to look at a PHB. And as Commissioner Lancaster said, a PHB is specifically designed for pedestrians. Bicyclists can become pedestrians under the right circumstances, but we have to meet the ADA compliance. And as far as my comment earlier to the commissioner or to the commission, certainly you gentlemen can decide how you want to prioritize. I just said that if you desire, you can always move it ahead on your priority list, but whether you do or not, that is a decision unto you and not the highway district.
Mr. Chair,
yes.
Forgive me if this has been said already. There were a couple times where some mics have seemed to lose volume a little bit. But just in thinking about how we prioritize things, and whether this kind of warrants increased prioritization, or not whether it does or doesn't, but whether it may, and kind of whether or not it's right to potentially increase this above other projects based on people coming in and asking it. I'm trying to think about kind of what the purpose of prioritization is, and meeting with all these stakeholders. And a lot of the time it's trying to infer or predict what the needs of the community are going to be. And so I just kind of want to point out that we don't have to do any inferring here. There is a member of the community coming to us and highlighting a need. And so, while that might not warrant leapfrogging a bunch of other programs, I do think there is some merit in someone taking the time out of their day to come in and highlight an issue that they are seeing, where a lot of the other prioritizations can come from, sometimes community planning and things like us trying to assume based on development and increased traffic patterns where things might be. There's someone coming up and saying this is where something is needed now, in their opinion. So I do think, while there might not be, well, I understand the concerns about leapfrogging other programs based on a single point of feedback. I think there is some value in someone coming out and saying, taking the time out of their day and saying there is a need here. And so I would just encourage, while I understand the caution, I appreciate the caution, I would encourage just viewing it, considering that viewpoint as well.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis, your motion, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, did not include putting this to the top of any list. It was to look at it when the list is reviewed in a couple of months. Was that what I?
Right, I said that when we do our priority list in a few months, that it'd be considered in the top few, I think is what I said. I didn't say, so the top five, I don't know, you can take that how you'd like.
Okay. Other commissioners? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Mrs. Cragg, quick question for you. I drive down Eagle Road through that roundabout a lot now that it's not under construction. I don't think there's any way to get from Sky Mesa north into that community and then into Albertsons. Is that right? There's no crosswalks. There's nothing at the roundabout. There's no signals. I know that because, like I said, I go down there almost every day to an area I'm building. And so there's some concern there. Do the kids in Sky Mesa go to school in Sienna Elementary?
Yeah, there are several kids that go to school in Siena. It's really supposed to be Hillsdale.
Right.
There was the cap on it, so.
Oh, yeah.
And there is no safe way of crossing. The Albertsons is gonna have a Starbucks, so there will be teenagers coming through our neighborhood trying to just run across the road.
But kiddos in Sky Mesa going to school in Siena, there's no way if they jumped on a bike that they could.
Not safely.
Well, I don't think they could. There's no crosswalk at the
Exactly.
roundabout. Not that I've ever noticed. Maybe there's certainly no sidewalks. But.
My children went to Sky Mesa for about 4 months, and we would never in a million years let them cross that road. So we just drove them. But it's very close and feasible to walk.
But there are crosswalks from Century Farms, a little bit, okay, further south. I know those. Okay,
Exactly.
thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioners, we're bumping up against a hard stop because of our ordinance that puts us to 5:30 unless extended. I would encourage a motion to extend in order to at least get this item done. We've got on the agenda behind this, we've got the Integrated 5-Year Work Plan report that I was going to make. It can certainly wait till next month. We've got staff communications that contains an item that's going to take a long time for us to discuss, and I'm not even sure Ms. Carson can put it out there in a short time frame. So looking at the fact that we're required to quit in 2 minutes, what do you wish to do regarding that? And we'll see where we go from there.
Mr. Chair, the Ravenhill item can be postponed to next month as school is out at this point.
I'm sorry, couldn't understand.
The Ravenhill item, if that's what you meant for discussion in staff communications, that can be postponed to next month as school is out right now.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis, did you?
Mr. Chairman, we have an active motion and a second on the floor. I'd ask that you call the question.
Yeah, I can't call the question. Can you? Did you?
What was that?
Are you calling the question?
Well, I'm asking you to call the question.
Mr.
Point is
Chairman.
that I can't, but you can.
I'm not following you, I'm sorry.
A call to the question has to be from one of the commissioners. The chairman can't do it.
Mr. Chairman, can we get a restatement of the motion and call the question?
Okay, no further discussion. Restatement of the motion, please.
The motion is that we ask that a pedestrian hybrid beacon crossing of Amity Road, either at location 1 or 2 or somewhere nearby, as presented today, be added as an interim project, and that we can prioritize that project in a few months when we do our normal community programs.
Mr. Ballard, does that suit the seconder? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lancaster.
in lieu of our time, I move that we extend our meeting for 15 minutes.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
I second.
Have a second, Mr. Licky. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody nay? Okay. No, it was made when it was still reading 5:30 on my clock and right here on the computer. I looked. We're legal. Okay, with that, Mr. Lancaster, how short or long can you give us a school zone subcommittee update? Because I'm going to take chairman's prerogative and move number 7 to next month.
Mr. Chairman, I may be able to make agenda item number 7 my shortest contribution to this meeting. With that, Mr. Chairman, should I proceed?
Please.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners Lewis and Lecky and I met this past week with our school zone subcommittee. The school district representative was invited but wasn't able to attend, and staff was in and out with other meetings. We discussed the Hillsdale Elementary communications that we've seen in the past, as well as some other communications that were shared by city staff. In short, there was a request from a citizen regarding a request to mark a crosswalk not in front of the school, and that discussion kind of morphed into the crossing in front of Hillsdale Elementary. Our subcommittee doesn't have a recommendation for anything different than what we recommended in early 2020, which was to program a community project there, which is number 1 on our community programs list, to install an enhanced crossing there, which at the time was the request from our school zone subcommittee, the school, and the YMCA representatives, and there were some others in there too, PTA, for example. So our recommendation hasn't changed, that it should still remain our number 1 priority project, and move forward with that. I can stop there for any questions about that, or I do have a brief discussion about the Raven Hill that I can report on now, as that was part of our meeting.
Any questions on the first part of Mr. Lancaster's report? Proceed with the second part.
So, Mr. Chairman, we also discussed somewhat the Raven Hill, I hope I'm getting that name right, concern that is in the staff communications. There's a lot of material there, some of which we didn't completely have at our disposal when we met. It does look, but in our discussions, we're not sure how to proceed with that at this time. It doesn't necessarily look like there's anything for this commission or for the city to do, perhaps other than to recommend no parking anytime in that neighborhood. Currently, as we understand it, there's no parking restrictions during school hours, but those that live in the neighborhood see parking after hours for school events, that sort of thing. I'm imagining Friday night football games, right? So the only perhaps suggestion that we have at this time is, that a solution could be to post no parking anytime. But that's as far as we got in that discussion, and we have more to discuss in the future, it appears. So that's my report, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Regarding your second item, I went out there and looked at it today, and my question to Ms. Carson before the meeting today was, who is it that says you cannot fence that off? And I got an answer that was not in our packet. And I'm not surprised. Things happen and people learn things all the time. Ms. Carson, would you like to tell them what you told me?
Yes, Mr. Chair. My understanding is that police do not recommend fencing that off, and I would have to say, take what I say with a grain of salt, but also I don't recommend fencing that off. I'm pulling up the location here now to show you. That location is a southern egress there for the campus for foot traffic. So in the event that there was some evacuation on campus that required students to leave the campus, currently there are 2 northern entrances, but that's the southern, that's the southern egress for foot traffic there at that gate. So it also, so that's the police side of it. Also, just for safe routes to school factor, that location allows these students to be able to access the school at a much shorter walk than having them go out to Locust Grove, where there will be construction soon and there are not complete sidewalks, and them going out to Locust Grove and then coming down through Puffin and entering the school. So those micropath connections are crucial to safe routes to school. And then in this case, it's also important for the egress on the campus.
And so the fire department access remains as a fire department access. It's just not the second access they required originally.
In this location, the fire department access is not the issue because fire does have 2 points of access, which is what they require. In this location, the conversation was more with the police department.
Okay.
If it came to evacuating students on foot for, I mean, I hate to say it, but for active shooter or situations like that, if students need to evacuate on foot, having a southern location is my understanding.
Yeah, when I looked at it, I had a little bit of a question whether or not a fire truck would high center on that little levee that's there. I mean, they might be able to get across it. It's currently blocked on each end with the canal going through the middle of it. It's blocked with what I call Forest Service Road barriers. There's a single padlock in the middle and 2 bars that come together. So it's got an access, small access on each side of that barricade. One's gravel. I think the other one may not even be gravel, but people do walk it. I saw somebody walk it while I was there. Okay, does any of that do anything for your committee?
Mr. Chairman, not really. I don't think it changed what we talked about, but,
Okay.
It looks like this is a topic that's probably going to go forward. So, that would be our recommendation, is that this is a future meeting topic, or something that we can take back again.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
I may need to get more information on the fire department access. It seems that those 2 accesses, there's a rule that I was unaware of, that those accesses have to be half the diameter of the campus apart from each other for fire. And since those are so close in location, those being Puffin and Millennium, since those are so close in location, they might not be adequate. So I would need to talk to fire about that as well.
Okay, and when you do it, raise my question about a truck and high centering. We'll carry this forward to next month's meeting, if that's okay, Ms. Carson, for further discussion and investigation. And Sergeant, you may want to be prepared to talk about the police side of it at that time. On your first item that you reported on, Mr. Lancaster, is any action expected or requested of the commission?
Mr. Chairman, our school zone or school subcommittee is not recommending any action other than what we've already done as far as programming it as our highest priority. So we don't have any recommended action, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Ms. Carson, is that reportable to the complainant?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, that the subcommittee looked into it, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, I have one item to report under future meeting topics. You can strike number 10. It has been restriped on the eastbound I-84 to Eagle Road exit. It is not a dual exit, it's a single exit, but it fairly quickly now has 2 lanes that lead to 3 lanes when it gets up to the Eagle Road intersection. If ITD is still listening, you have some potholes where they sandblasted the original right-hand fog line off. Apparently they damaged the pavement somewhat, so somebody may want to get some cold mix.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry, I'm glad to know you're still there. It's very nice. Thank y'all very much for getting that done. I hope it alleviates the backing up onto the interstate problem and those skid marks can gradually wear away. Okay, we're pushing time again. Anything else?
The July meeting date, Mr. Chair. As of now, that meeting date's tentative, so we just need to discuss if with the integrated 5-year work plan prioritization, the CICAC update, and the Ravenhill micropath can be postponed to August. As far as the Ravenhill micropath, I think it can be postponed. School doesn't start till the end of August. So we have a conversation. This is going to be an ongoing conversation. Likely, it's a conversation we'd want to get school administrators in on anyways. So it might be prudent to postpone it until after school starts. As far as the other 2 updates, I'll leave that to you as a commission to decide if you need to meet in July or if you want to postpone those as well.
My memory is the commission at the last meeting indicated they wish to move July 4 to July 11, that there was not an official action, and this agenda today, somewhere in it mentions needing to make July 11 an official meeting date. With all of that said, gentlemen, what are your wishes regarding meeting in July?
I think we should meet on the 11th.
Is that a motion? Was that a motion?
Yes.
We have a motion and a second. This commission will meet on July the 11th. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
I think the ayes have it. Ms. Carson, we will work on an agenda. Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Any opposed? Thank you all. Nice long day. Tom, thank you for getting the mayor here. You just thought of it.